Republican, Democrat, they both have been opposed to it. They were publicly opposed to it back in 2010. They were very clear that this was an enormous mistake. But what really happened for the governor is that a lot of the people that didn't like the high-stakes testing, the high-quality academic standards, the charter schools, the accountability, all the things that made Massachusetts successful, a lot of those special interest groups, the teachers union, the superintendents association, the school committee association, and others, really coalesced around Governor Patrick when he was elected in 2006. And he himself made it clear from the beginning that he wasn't really for testing, and that is really the linchpin. So when Common Core and Race to the Top came along, it was really kind of this perfect storm for him. He had the prospects of getting $250 million from the federal government, which would help him when he wanted to run for re-election. It allowed him to get rid of the higher quality standards, who his main core backers wanted to get rid of, and it allowed them to replace MCAS with a national test, which will be much more subjective and less accountable at the state level. So it all kind of blended together. But if there's one person who probably was the key decision maker, aside from the Board of Education, who really kind of did it at his behest, it was Governor Patrick. And I think it was both a financial calculus, because there's an opportunity to get $250 million, but it was also, there was some political calculus. But essentially, the Patrick administration sold our high quality standards and tests to the federal government for $250 million.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to stand up. I was educated as a scientist and mathematician, but that's not why I came. I came because I'm really disturbed by the lack of knowledge that our school children have of civics and American history, our Constitution, and how government works. Those are detailed questions, which I hope to get to later. But my question for you is this, it's a general question. Why do you think there is so much motivation at the highest levels of government to dumb down the system? What's the motivation for that? What are they trying to accomplish?
So that's a good question. I mean, the first thing on the civics, I agree with you. And part of the sort of suite of reforms and tests was to have a U.S. history MCAS test. We have very high quality standards. Again, the standards that Sandy developed, that people across this political spectrum regarded as the best in the country. We were in the 11th and a half hour. The Patrick administration and his Board of Education killed it off. They said that out of our, it's almost a $30 billion budget, that we didn't have the $2.4 million to score the tests. So they just put that on the shelf. We've done a lot of research and a lot of events in the last several years on U.S. history MCAS, and we're continuing to try to push to put that back, because it was in the original Ed Reform Law. It was one of the things that the architects of the Ed Reform Law in 1993 were very clear. Kids should have an education in the founding documents and the Federalist Papers, and understand the basic language and contours of democratic life. So that, just on the civics and history side of it. And I agree with you, it's remarkable. I think that many of the proponents of this sort of softer skills, fuzzier mathematics, they honestly believe that the way to keep children engaged with academic subject matter is to make it hands-on, to make it easier, to water it down, that's the only way you're going to be able to keep these kids' attention. And I think one of the things that has been remarkable, again, about the success here in Massachusetts, and Sandy will talk about in a lot of detail, is that's not the approach that Massachusetts actually took. The rest of the country kept on this soft skills, watered down, dumbed down approach to things, and it's kind of taken them down a different path. Well, Massachusetts said, we're not doing that. We're going to have kids read Huckleberry Finn and Moby Dick and high-quality literature and drama. We're going to have kids prepared for Algebra 1 really by the 8th grade, because we know that that's the gateway for all higher-level math, and then that's what the most competitive countries in the world do. We're going to take that route. And what we know is that when you pick that route, that you can go from middle of the pack to #1 in the country and internationally competitive. So I don't know what their motivations are, but I think that they earnestly and perhaps ideologically believe that if they dumb things down, that this is the way to keep kids engaged. I think the evidence from Massachusetts and from the evidence from the high-quality charter schools in Massachusetts, which probably use these academic tools better than any other group of schools in the state, it's clear that that's not true. That if you engage kids with high-quality subject matter, that that's how you keep them interested. That it's the places that haven't challenged kids and haven't given them something substantive to think about, haven't taught them about human nature through literature, haven't taught them high-quality vocabulary, that's when kids drop out and become disengaged. And I think, the fundamental fact is that we have to continue to push for taking young children's academic development in their minds and their character seriously. And that's what a good quality set of standards and curriculum and adults that have expectations, that's what you can do.
Yes, Jamie, I'd like to thank both you and Sandra for coming. I want to tell you this is the second time I've come to hear you. I learned so much the first time. I knew I had missed so much I had to hear you again. But one of the things I learned that I took from what you said was I went home and I started doing the research. One of the questions that Frank asked, I think I can answer. I started looking in and doing the research going backwards to see where some of these organizations were coming from. I started working my way backwards. You know how they always say follow the money. Well, Deval Patrick happens to sit on the board of the chief. I found that because the first thing I did was look at those companies, and then I clicked on their websites and I clicked on the board of directors. You would be amazed at who the people are that are sitting on these boards. My question, I guess, is I learn more and more about this. I get more and more frustrated. The more I learn, the more I realize how awful it is. What can we do to stop it? I mean, there is such influence peddling going on here. I'm wondering, is there something we can really do?
Yep.
And thank you and Sandra for coming.
Well, thanks. I appreciate your interest and your kind words. So you're right. I mean, what I say about Common Core is that the conflict of interest have conflicts of interest. I mean, the way in which, I'm not into conspiracy theories or black helicopters or anything like that. I think there's enough evidence that we have before us, whether it's the poor quality, which we know, the illegality, which we know, and the cost that we know, that there are serious problems here. But I think that, what is clear is that, look, there are folks that honestly believe. I mean, the Gates Foundation was funded a lot of this work. They've spent, again, $150 million, and they've been ecumenical in how they've been passing out the money. I mean, Jeb Bush, the former governor of Florida, has received an enormous amount of money. The Council of Chief State School Officers, it's been Republicans and Democrats. This is not a partisan issue, really. I mean, sort of a simplistic breakdown is that it's sort of the bureaucrats sort of against everybody else, I think, in a lot of ways. But the fundamental, I think, fact of it is that, and the examples are in Michigan. So just today, the governor of Michigan, who's pro-Common Core, signed a budget that defunds Common Core because the state legislature in Michigan made them defund it. And if the governor wanted to have a budget, and he's in favor of Common Core, if he wanted to have a budget this year, he was going to have to sign the budget that wasn't going to fund Common Core. So that's one state. Another state, and it's an excellent example, maybe the best example in the country, is Indiana. So one of the national proponents of Common Core is a guy named Tony Bennett. He's the elected state commissioner, essentially, in Indiana. Indiana is a very red state. Tony Bennett's a Republican. He had $3 million in the bank last fall. He lost in an upset to a virtually unknown Democratic candidate, and who got more statewide votes than the Republican governor in a pretty red state. And what that candidate did, that Democratic candidate did, is she stitched together Catholic school moms, suburban parents, Tea Party folks, people that were concerned about federal control, red state voters, and Democrats, and she got them all together. So that effort was really driven by two women, Heather Crossan and Erin Tuttle. They're two moms. They're essentially suburban moms who send their kids to Catholic schools, and they were so concerned that the Archdiocese of Indianapolis had adopted Common Core because in Indiana they have vouchers, so you get through school choice. Parents can send their kids to private or parochial schools. In order for that state to have a voucher program, they had to have the standards and tests be the state standards and tests, and Indiana had adopted Common Core. But it was really these two moms, and they say that it was $1,000 and 1,000 hours that allowed them to not only beat they call him a rock, Tony Bennett, they call him a rock star. That's what he was described. He'd fly all around the country, he was going in all these states talking about Common Core and how great it was. And they defeated this rock star, and they pushed the state legislature to put the pause on it. So Indiana right now has paused Common Core. There's a variety of different states that have done this. There's a group of mothers out in Salt Lake City that have been, just helped push a 65% of the Republican Party convention voted to denounce Common Core. The Republican National Committee has just passed a strong platform against Common Core. But you're seeing now, I think at this point, a lot of different parents, and I think the first step is to get educated about it and do your research and then talk to other people. And I can put you in touch with these women because they really have set the gold standard in terms of pushing back against this. And it may seem like it's an enormous, inevitable turn of events, but that's not true. And the people across the country that are working on this are demonstrating that's not true. And we did a op-ed that appeared in the Wall Street Journal just in the last week or so, which reaches about 2 million readers. And so this topic is very, very active. And I think that the more grassroots engagement and the more education and the more people talk about it, the more hope we have of rolling it back.
Yeah, go ahead. This young lady.
You mentioned the 3 federal laws that prohibit
Yep.
federal control of local education. Why hasn't any legal action been taken?
That's a good question. So, Pioneer Institute generally doesn't litigate. What we did was get the best lawyers we could to map out the laws themselves. And I'm not an attorney, but I think to bring forward a lawsuit, you have to have someone with standing. So there's been a school committee out in central Massachusetts, the Tantascwa Regional School Committee, voted unanimously not to adopt Common Core. They filed a bill that didn't go anywhere in the Massachusetts legislature, but they filed a bill against it. But what I think you would probably need to do is you'd probably need to have a collection of school committees. You'd probably need to have some parents who maybe decide they wanted to opt out of Common Core, maybe a state that wasn't given these waivers to the No Child Left Behind law because they didn't adopt Common Core or were coerced or their federal money was withheld. You get the combination, I think, of those folks with standing, I think as other lawyers call it, to file a suit. But it really is a different set of lawyering skills from diagnosing the laws and then someone who's a litigator. We're not. That's not the kind of work we do. Although we are talking with people about trying to push that forward.
Question here.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
Have the educators that are in the trenches been kept ignorant to really what Common Core is about? I ask this because I come from Sandwich. I know a lot of teachers and the administrators, and just last month I was on a principal search committee working with a dozen of the educators. And when Common Core comes up, they speak as if, oh, Common Core is coming. And this is the curriculum director for literacy. Oh, Common Core is coming, with no hesitation.
Right.
Are they ignorant to really what it's going to do to literacy and the classics?
Right.
Have they been kept ignorant to this program?
Yeah. So that's a good question.
Because they are dedicated teachers.
That I'll let Sandy talk more about because that's really her area of expertise. I will just say again, when state legislators have been bypassed, when they have the vote at the Board of Education in the end of July in 2010, they were not really looking for a lot of feedback or input. They wanted to do this. They wanted to ram this through, and I think it is a case where, it's, frankly, it's like the healthcare thing. You gotta pass it to find out what's in it. And I think I think there's a lot of teachers, particularly English teachers, I think probably have the most to lose because again, it cuts classic literature by about 60% in Massachusetts. So they have a lot to lose. I'm not sure why college English departments would be in favor of it. Most of what is studied in a college English class is literature and poetry and drama, nonfiction and what they call informational texts you know, there isn't a serious English department in the Western world that would say that, you know, a lot of informational text or non-fiction is really appropriate for college English class, and some of it here and there, but most of it's the classic literature, and so I don't know, you know, why, you know, college professors haven't been more up in arms about it, but I think a lot of it is that it's been done in this very stealthy manner, and they moved very quickly, and they used these federal grants and these coercion to kind of corral states into it, and so I think they were really hoping that they could just do it in sort of the dark of night, and that no one would notice, and that you know, we wake up one day and we had national standards and testing, curriculum, and all this other data nonsense. So I think they were really hoping to kind of pull a fast one on people.
Sandra has suggested that she's going to answer a number of these questions, so I just took the microphone out of a lady's hands up here. We're going to give it back and let that be the last question for now. And I promise that we'll have plenty of time for questions after Sandra goes.
have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to take this last question. We'll take a little stretch. Sandra will come and talk, and then we'll have lots of time for questions, and some of these will be answered by Sandra's talk. So,
Well, maybe I'll address it to Jamie and Sandra, because if you're going to answer it, you don't have to, but what work have you done regarding the private independent schools? Parents are paying fortunes in these schools for these very high academic standards. How have these headmasters and student bodies in those schools responded to this, and have you coalesced them in any way?
So that's a good question, and I'll let Sandy handle most of it, but I'll just say this. So a lot of archdioceses across the country, and that's you know, a great many of the kids that participate in school choice in this country go to Catholic schools. We are in the process of working on a paper and research on how this is going to impact school choice. Pioneer was instituted and set up 20 years or so ago to advance charter schools and school choice